Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about something we all experience hurt. Whether it's a thoughtless comment, a betrayal, or an action that shakes us, we all have moments when we feel wounded by the words or actions of others. But there's one important thing I want you to take away today: never react when you're hurt. It might sound simple, but it's one of the hardest things to practice in our lives. And here's why: when we experience hurt, it can feel as if a wave of emotion overtakes us. This surge of feelings, whether it's anger, sadness, confusion, or even betrayal, has the power to cloud our judgment, making it incredibly difficult to respond thoughtfully in the moment. We've all had those times where someone's words or actions cut deeply, and we immediately feel compelled to act. Whether it's snapping back in anger or seeking to defend ourselves, our initial reactions are often impulsive and driven by emotion. But what happens when we allow our hurt to dictate our actions without taking a moment to reflect? In those raw moments of hurt, the mind becomes clouded, making it nearly impossible to see the situation clearly. Our natural instinct is to react, to protect ourselves, to right the wrongs that have been done to us. This is an understandable impulse because it feels as though our safety, our sense of self, and our dignity are at risk. But here's the truth: when we act solely from the place of emotion, our response is often disconnected from who we truly are and what we truly want to accomplish in the situation. It's reactive rather than reflective. Think about a time when you've been hurt. Perhaps someone said something to you that stung, or maybe an action left you feeling betrayed. In that initial wave of emotion, how did you respond? Did you fire back with a quick, hurtful remark? Did you withdraw, feeling small and defeated? In those moments, the intensity of our emotions can distort our perception of the situation. The words we hear or the actions we experience can feel so much larger than they are. The pain we feel in those moments becomes the lens through which we view the world. The danger here is that in the fog of hurt, we often fail to see the full picture. Hurt can trick us into thinking we have all the facts, when in reality, we are only seeing a fragment of the story. For example, when someone speaks harshly to us, our hurt can lead us to assume that they meant to harm us intentionally. We might even tell ourselves that they don't care about us, that they don't care about us, that they're deliberately trying to make us feel bad. But in reality, we may be misinterpreting their words, not taking into account the possibility that they were having a bad day, or that they were acting out of their own struggles. When we react immediately, we risk reinforcing our own emotional narrative without considering the broader context. What makes matters worse is that hurt often triggers a deep sense of vulnerability in us. Our emotional response to the situation can be based on fears we may not even be fully aware of: fears of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of not being enough. These fears can blind us to the reality of the situation, making us respond with more emotion than the situation may truly warrant. The more vulnerable we feel, the more intense our reaction becomes, and the harder it is to respond with clarity. This is where the power of a pause comes in. When we are hurt, it's natural to want to react, to protect ourselves. But when we act out of our hurt, we allow that emotion to take control of us, and we risk making decisions we'll later regret. This is why it's so important to give ourselves the space to process before reacting. By allowing ourselves that moment to breathe, we begin to clear away the cloud of emotion and can begin to respond with greater insight. Instead of acting on impulse, we can take a step back and ask ourselves, what am I really feeling right now? What is the source of this hurt? By sitting with our emotions, we begin to understand them better. Hurt doesn't have to define us, it can inform us. In fact, it's in these moments of vulnerability that we have the greatest opportunity for growth. We learn more about ourselves, our triggers, and what we need in our relationships. The key is not to act from that hurt, but to use it as a signal to pause and reflect. Taking this pause doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or ignoring the hurt you feel. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about acknowledging your emotions, giving them space to exist, and then using that space to create a thoughtful response. When we respond from a place of emotional clarity, we engage with the situation in a way that reflects our values rather than simply reacting to the pain. This is a skill that requires practice. It's not easy to slow down when emotions are running high. It's challenging to resist the urge to snap back or to withdraw when we feel vulnerable. But when we take that moment to reflect, we start to regain control over our emotional state. We stop being at the mercy of our feelings and instead begin to direct them. This doesn't mean we ignore our hurt, it means we choose to honor it in a way that's more constructive. So when you feel hurt, remind yourself to pause before you react. Take a few deep breaths. Give yourself time to understand your emotions before you respond. Ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? What would a response that reflects my values look like? By doing so, you create the space for a thoughtful response rather than an impulsive reaction. You may find that once the fog of emotion lifts, your perspective shifts. The situation that once seemed overwhelming may now appear more manageable. And most importantly, you'll be able to engage in a way that is more true to yourself. Remember, it's not the hurt itself that determines how you move forward, but how you choose to respond to it. By taking the time to clear the fog of emotion, you empower yourself to act from a place of wisdom, strength, and clarity. You may still feel hurt, but you will no longer be at the mercy of it. Instead, you can rise above it and respond in a way that reflects the person you truly are. Emotions are an integral part of the human experience. We feel a wide range of emotions throughout our lives: joy, sadness, fear, anger, love, and everything in between. These emotions can be powerful forces guiding us through decisions, relationships, and challenges. However, it is essential to recognize that emotions are not meant to be our masters. They are messengers, signaling something important about our internal state, our values, or the situations we are facing. Understanding this distinction between being guided by emotions and allowing emotions to control us can be the key to living a more balanced, intentional life. When we experience an emotion, it is often because something in our environment or within ourselves has triggered it. This might be an external event, like a comment from someone, a change in our routine, or a challenging situation. It could also be internal, such as an unresolved fear or a need that's not being met. These emotional responses serve as signals that something important is happening in our lives, prompting us to pay attention and take action. But while emotions are valuable indicators, they don't always represent the full truth of a situation, nor should they dictate our actions without reflection. Take, for example, the emotion of anger. When we get angry, it's often a response to feeling disrespected, unheard, or threatened in some way. Anger signals to us that there is an injustice or boundary that has been violated. In this sense, anger is a messenger. It is telling us that something needs to be addressed. But anger, when left unchecked or uncontrolled, can become a master. It can lead us to lash out impulsively, causing harm to ourselves and others, often in ways we later regret. If we listen to anger without examining its roots or considering a thoughtful response, we risk being driven by it in destructive ways. On the other hand, if we approach anger as a messenger, we can pause and ask ourselves what it's really trying to tell us. Is there a boundary that needs to be set? Are we feeling disrespected or perhaps misunderstood? Rather than allowing anger to control us and dictate how we react, we can use it as a guide to clarify what we need and how we want to express ourselves. By listening to anger as a message, we open ourselves to a deeper understanding of our emotions and how to manage them constructively. The same principle applies to all emotions, whether they are positive or negative. Fear, for example, is often seen as an emotion we should avoid or suppress. However, fear, like anger, has a valuable purpose. Fear is often a signal that we are facing something unknown or uncertain, something that challenges our sense of security or pushes us out of our comfort zone. Fear may arise when we are considering taking a risk, stepping into a new opportunity, or making a change in our lives. It's a natural response to the unfamiliar, but if we allow fear to take the reins, we can become paralyzed by it. We may avoid necessary changes, miss out on new opportunities, or remain stuck in situations that no longer serve us. Instead of being ruled by fear, we can choose to see it as a messenger that alerts us to something important. We can ask ourselves, what is this fear telling me? Is it a fear of failure or is it a fear of growth? Is there something I need to learn or prepare for before moving forward? By reflecting on the message fear brings, we can use it to help us make more informed and thoughtful decisions, rather than allowing it to control our actions or hold us back. Similarly, feelings of sadness are often viewed negatively, but sadness is another messenger with a purpose. Sadness arises when we experience loss, disappointment, or unmet expectations. It signals that something has changed or is no longer as it once was, and this can be a difficult reality to face. However, sadness, when embraced, can lead to personal growth and deeper understanding. It allows us to grieve, to process, and to eventually heal. Sadness can prompt us to examine our values and remind us of the things we truly care about. When we see sadness as a messenger, we are able to sit with it rather than avoid it or suppress it. We give ourselves permission to feel what we are feeling and to understand the deeper meaning behind the sadness. In this way, sadness can guide us toward healing, self-compassion, and a renewed sense of connection to what matters most in our lives. Rather than being overwhelmed by sadness, we can use it as a tool for reflection and growth. Emotions, in their essence, are not good or bad, they simply are. They exist to inform us, to help us navigate the complex landscape of our inner worlds and the world around us. They are natural, instinctual reactions to stimuli, and they serve to keep us aligned with our values, needs, and desires. However, when we allow emotions to become our masters, they can lead us into reactive patterns, cloud our judgment, and cause us to make decisions we may later regret. The key to emotional well-being lies in our ability to separate ourselves from our emotions and view them as messengers. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying what we feel. It means creating space to reflect on what those emotions are telling us and how we can use them to inform our actions. It's about understanding that we don't have to act impulsively in response to an emotion. We can pause, process, and choose a thoughtful course of action. Ultimately, emotions are not our enemies, but neither are they our rulers. By embracing emotions as messengers, we empower ourselves to navigate life with greater clarity, self-awareness, and intentionality. Instead of being swept away by the currents of our emotions, we learn to steer the ship with a steady hand, allowing our emotions to guide us to deeper understanding and more authentic living. Understanding is often the bridge that connects pain to healing. When we experience hurt, whether from someone's words, actions, or even our own mistakes, the instinctive reaction is to protect ourselves, to close off, or to seek revenge. We might lash out or withdraw, often driven by emotions that cloud our judgment and create more confusion. But healing does not come from retribution or avoidance. It comes from understanding ourselves, the situation, and the other person involved. When we truly understand, we are in a better position to heal and move forward. At the heart of healing is the ability to step back and ask, what is this situation teaching me, rather than reacting immediately? Understanding allows us to create space for reflection. When we're hurt, it's easy to get caught up in the intensity of our emotions, believing that the pain we feel is the entire truth. However, emotions, as real and valid as they are, do not always tell the whole story. They represent our initial response, but they often obscure the larger context of a situation. When someone hurts us, our first instinct may be to assign blame, to focus on how the other person's actions have wronged us. We might find ourselves consumed by resentment or anger, fixated on the injustice of it all. But if we truly want to heal, we need to go deeper than the surface emotions. Understanding doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or pretending that our pain doesn't matter. It means exploring the situation from a broader perspective, seeing it from both sides, and recognizing that hurt is rarely as simple as a one-sided offense. Take the example of a friend who says something hurtful. In the heat of the moment, you might feel betrayed, as if they've deliberately tried to hurt you. You might find yourself stewing over their words, replaying the conversation over and over in your mind and crafting a response based on your anger. But the path to healing doesn't lie in reaction, it lies in understanding. Perhaps your friend was having a difficult day and let their frustrations spill over in a way they didn't intend. Or maybe they weren't aware of how their words affected you. Understanding their perspective without immediately jumping to conclusions or blaming them can make all the difference in how you approach the situation. It opens the door to a dialogue that might help both parties heal. Similarly, understanding isn't just about seeing the situation from the other person's point of view, it's also about understanding ourselves. When we're hurt, it's important to reflect on why we feel the way we do. Are there underlying fears or insecurities that this situation has triggered? Are there unmet needs or expectations that we haven't communicated clearly? Often when we're hurt, it's not just about the event that transpired, but also about what the event represents to us personally. For example, if someone's comment makes us feel small or unworthy, it may not be the comment itself that causes the pain, but rather what it touches within us. Maybe we've struggled with self-esteem or have unresolved feelings about being judged. By understanding what is at the root of our emotional response, we gain insight into our own vulnerabilities and can address them with compassion rather than letting them control our reactions. Healing also requires understanding that people, including ourselves, are imperfect. We are all carrying wounds and have our own struggles that can sometimes manifest in ways that hurt others. By acknowledging the complexity of human behavior, we create room for empathy and compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. It's easy to get caught up in the narrative of being a victim of someone else's actions. But true healing involves recognizing that we all make mistakes and that none of us are exempt from the messiness of being human. When we understand that hurt is not always intentional, we can release the need for immediate retaliation or blame. We may still feel pain, but we are no longer driven by the desire to make the other person feel the same. Instead, we can choose to process our feelings and find a path forward that fosters healing. This understanding allows us to let go of the emotional grip that anger and resentment can have on us, creating space for forgiveness. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as letting someone off the hook for their actions, but it's not about excusing the behavior. It's about understanding that holding on to anger and resentment only keeps us tethered to the past, preventing us from moving forward. Forgiveness is an act of self-care. When we understand that forgiveness is not for the other person, but for our own peace and growth, we can begin to release the negative emotions that bind us. Understanding also requires patience. Healing is not a linear process, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's easy to expect that once we understand the situation, we should immediately feel better. But the reality is that emotional healing takes time. We might find ourselves revisiting the hurt, feeling overwhelmed by it, or even doubting our ability to heal. But this is a natural part of the process. With understanding comes the realization that healing is a journey, one that requires both time and gentleness. The more we understand ourselves and others, the more we cultivate the compassion needed to heal. Understanding creates empathy, and empathy is the antidote to bitterness. It helps us see beyond the hurt and acknowledge the humanity in others. It allows us to forgive, to move forward, and to find peace not in the absence of pain, but in the recognition of its role in our growth. In the end, understanding is not just about getting over the pain, it's about finding meaning in the pain. It's about learning, growing, and allowing the hurt to shape us in a way that makes us stronger, kinder, and more compassionate. When we make understanding a priority, we not only heal ourselves, but also foster a deeper connection with those around us. Because ultimately, healing isn't about forgetting the hurt, but about transforming it into something that empowers us to live with greater wisdom and grace. Peace is a state of being that many of us long for, but it often feels elusive. We live in a world full of noise, both external and internal, that can disturb our sense of calm. The demands of daily life, the complexities of relationships, and the constant barrage of information can create a sense of chaos that makes it hard to feel at peace. And yet, the most important thing to remember is that your peace is your responsibility. It is not something that can be given to you by others, nor can it be solely dependent on external circumstances. It's something that comes from within, and it's up to you to cultivate and protect it. Too often we look outside ourselves for the source of our peace. We believe that if we just had the perfect job, the ideal relationship, or the right circumstances, then we would finally feel at peace. We may think that if others around us behaved better, or if the world were less stressful, we could find the tranquility we crave. But this mindset places our peace in the hands of things beyond our control, and this is a dangerous way to live. It creates an endless cycle of disappointment because external circumstances are always shifting and people will inevitably let us down. When we tie our peace to things outside of ourselves, we give up the power to protect and nurture it. The truth is that peace comes from within. It's not dependent on a perfect world, a flawless situation, or even on other people's actions. It's a state of being that comes from how we choose to respond to the world around us. We cannot control every external factor, but we can control how we react to them. This is where responsibility comes in. We are responsible for how we manage our emotions, how we interpret the events in our lives, and how we maintain our inner balance. When we accept that our peace is our responsibility, we begin to shift from a mindset of victimhood to one of empowerment. It's easy to feel like the victim when things go wrong, especially when life doesn't turn out as we expect. If someone hurts us, we might feel justified in holding on to anger, resentment, or frustration. However, holding on to these emotions only steals our peace. When we allow ourselves to be controlled by negative emotions or by the actions of others, we relinquish our power. We become a prisoner to circumstances and other people's behavior, allowing them to dictate how we feel and whether we feel peaceful. But when we take responsibility for our peace, we stop allowing others or external circumstances to dictate our emotional state. This doesn't mean that we suppress our emotions or ignore the challenges we face. It means that we acknowledge our feelings, but we do not let them take over. We recognize that we have the power to choose how we respond, and that choice is where our peace lies. For example, if someone insults us, we may initially feel hurt or angry. That's a natural response. But we don't have to dwell in that anger. We can acknowledge the feeling, examine where it's coming from, and then decide how we want to respond. Do we want to hold on to the anger and let it consume us? Or do we want to let it go and find peace in letting go of the need for validation or revenge? Taking responsibility for our peace also means setting boundaries. In many situations, we are faced with people or circumstances that threaten our sense of calm. Whether it's a toxic relationship, a high-pressure work environment, or a difficult family dynamic, there are things in our lives that can disrupt our inner peace. But we don't have to let these things control us. By setting healthy boundaries, we protect our emotional well-being and maintain our sense of peace. This may mean saying no to things that drain us, distancing ourselves from people who are not supportive, or carving out time for self-care. By taking ownership of the choices we make, we create a life that supports our peace rather than undermines it. One of the most powerful tools in protecting your peace is mindfulness. When we practice mindfulness, we become more aware of our thoughts, emotions, and reactions. We stop letting our minds run on autopilot, reacting to everything without pause. Instead, we take a step back and observe what's happening inside of us. By doing this, we can catch ourselves before we react impulsively and instead choose a more thoughtful response. This gives us the ability to stay grounded in the present moment, no matter what's going on around us. Mindfulness allows us to observe our emotions without getting swept away by them. We can feel anger, sadness, or frustration, but we don't have to let those emotions dictate how we behave. We can choose to acknowledge them, process them, and then let them go. Another essential aspect of taking responsibility for your peace is forgiveness. Holding on to grudges or resentments only harms us. It keeps us tethered to the past, preventing us from moving forward. Forgiveness is not about excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing ourselves from the emotional weight that others' actions place on us. When we forgive, we take back control of our peace. We stop letting past events or past hurts dictate our emotional state. Forgiveness doesn't mean we forget, but it means we release the hold that the hurt has on us. It allows us to move forward, lighter and more at peace. Ultimately, your peace is yours to protect. No one else can give it to you, and no one else can take it away from you. It is something that comes from within, and it is your responsibility to create it, nurture it, and safeguard it. When you make peace a priority in your life, you begin to see that it's not something that can be disrupted by the world around you. It's a way of being that you carry with you, no matter where you go or what challenges you face. By taking responsibility for your peace, you reclaim your power, your emotional well-being, and your ability to navigate life with grace and resilience. Your peace is yours. Tend to it, protect it, and own it fully.in. Conclusion: the journey to peace, healing, and emotional well-being is not one that is controlled by external forces, but by our own choices and perspectives. The key to living a balanced and fulfilling life lies in understanding that our emotions are messengers, not masters, and that our peace is our responsibility. By embracing this truth, we empower ourselves to navigate the challenges and complexities of life with clarity and resilience. Healing begins with understanding ourselves, others, and the situations we encounter, and peace comes from within, nurtured through mindfulness, boundaries, and forgiveness. In each moment, we have the ability to choose how we respond. And in doing so, we take ownership of our emotional landscape. True peace is not found in the absence of difficulties, but in the way we choose to face them. So as we move forward in life, let us remember that our peace is always within our reach, and it is ours to cultivate, protect, and embrace fully.